Alright, so just getting ready to dive a little farther into setting these bucket and shim valve clearances. Of course, the first thing that I ran into when I got in here was that this this cam carrier stud was stripped, and there was already a Healey coil in there which basically disintegrated when I started taking it out, so I have to look at fixing that up first thing. I don't really want to put another Healey coil in there because of the frequency that these cam carriers have to come on and off to do the valve clearances, so we'll be looking for something else, and I've come up with a solution that I hope will work for this. And here it is. This is an exhaust stud from a VW bus, which is the same length as the original studs out of the Jensen Healey head for the valve carrier, or sorry, the cam carrier, but it interestingly has a 9 by 1 1/4 thread on one end and an 8 by 1 1/4 thread on the other. So should be able to enlarge that hole a little bit, tap it for the 9 by 1 1/4, and then have the stock 8 by 1 1/4 thread, the same as all the other studs, so we don't have some kind of wonky mismatch of nuts. So that's what we're gonna do now. All right. Well, I didn't record that all, but that's gone in fairly well. A lot nicer and sturdier than putting a Healey coil in there. So happy with that, and onward and forward with this valve adjustment. Got the alternator mounted. Did make one small modification. The mounting holes had elongated on both sides. This thing had a whole bunch of lateral slop in it, and there's a gap at the back here. I'll see if I can find a picture of it when I took it off the engine, but didn't have, looked like it ought to have a spacer in there, but didn't, just had the sleeve. I thought, oh, there's got to be a spacer there, so I had to look online and saw some other cars, and they had this gap there as well with just the spacer, and it seemed really silly. So
low power.
I machined an 8mm spacer for in here, and that's taken all the slop out of that. I don't know if other cars were also missing the spacer, but that seemed like a bad idea. Anyway, nice and tight now. On belt is mounted, so one more step. Still working to get this engine ready to fire. Making good progress, but I did get down to the exhaust. Now I've got to put this header on. Everything seems fine except for this one stud here, which just basically slides almost directly into the hole because it's, or is it this one? Oh, it's this one. Yeah. So that's obviously no good. I have to figure out what to do with that. It looks like that's already been drilled out. I did get another one of the VW M9 studs, so I think that's going to be my first crack at it. That one seems to thread in okay. A little sloppy, but once it's tightened, it's all right. But it's a little long, obviously, so I'm going to have to modify it a bit. Take some of the threads off. Lots of fun. Alright, well, that's worked okay. I had to cut about 6 mil off of either end to get enough threads. Still have to run probably a couple of washers to pick up the threads on the header side, but yeah, that went in just fine, so that's good. Now I have to figure out an exhaust. I think I'll go see if I can get the stock one apart and use that, and then we're pretty much ready to roll. I'll do a bit of a walk around of the stand and the wiring, and hopefully the next day or two we'll be trying to fire this thing. Here's the stock exhaust. I don't know if this will be going back on the car or not, although it's, you know, it's got surface rust on it, but it's actually pretty solid. So I definitely don't want to cut it up. See if we can get it apart and get a couple of the mufflers in line on the engine stand to run it. But for now, I think I'll just take some measurements front to back Looks like it's got some ANSA tips on it, which is nice. Try to keep those. Clean them up. Yeah, I think I should be able to get this apart. Well, yesterday was the day. I'm not going to lie and say that this is the first time that this thing has run. But here we are, all together, set up on the run stand, wired up to the battery, and basically this happens. So yeah, pretty pleased with that. It's not completely without issues. Um, Obviously there's some backfiring, so probably the timing I got to do some adjustments on. I did a compression test and the front two cylinders were quite low, like 50. The others were, 4 was alright, 3 was low as well, but not that low. And I did the old dump a bunch of oil down the cylinders and opened the throttle up and put it through a few revolutions by hand, and then did the compression test again and 1 and 2 and up to 150. So thinking probably rings, but I'm gonna try some fix in a bottle and see whether that loosens things up, gets rid of some of the carbon, and hopefully by running it for a while I might get it to come back. Otherwise we might be looking at a ring job here. But anyway, the stand works well, the engine runs, and onward and forward. I did discover that this car, after I was poking around with these carbs and checking them out, these are actually a pair of 45s rather than 40s that Jensen would have had from new. So I'm thinking these are probably a Lotus setup. In any case, that's not a bad thing, as long as they're jetted properly, and that's going to be the next trick. Anyway, all good on the engine front.